Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Lacked Fact podcast, which highlights recent clinically relevant research, policy statements, and protocols that you, as a practicing lactation professional, would probably like to know about. I'm your host, Dr. Eglash. I'm a board-certified family physician and breastfeeding and lactation medicine specialist at the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine and Public Health. This podcast is written and produced by the nonprofit organization IABLE, which is the Institute for the Advancement of Breastfeeding and Lactation Education. We have no commercial funders for this podcast series. Today's Lacked Fact is about food proteins in breast milk. More specifically, I want to focus on the factors that determine transmission of food proteins into breast milk and how long food proteins stay in breast milk after ingestion. Many exclusively breastfed infants are suspected of having sensitivity to dairy or other food proteins in their mom's breast milk because of various symptoms such as persistent vomiting, infrequent pooping, allergic proctocolitis with blood-streaked stools, generalized fussiness, and significant reflux symptoms. I've heard from several physicians in my community and from around the world that when exclusively breastfed infants are suspected of having food sensitivity, their mothers are instructed to stop breastfeeding for 2 weeks to get all the protein out of their breast milk, which means that they end up recommending a hypoallergenic formula for 2 weeks. First of all, this claim that it takes 2 weeks for food proteins to leave breast milk is not evidence-based. I want to talk about this, and I'm citing the article Breastfeeding, Maternally Transferred Allergens in Breast Milk, Protective or Sensitizing? The authors are Frock Schocker and Uta Japay, and this was published in Molecular Nutrition Food Research in 2021. The authors describe the different factors that determine the transfer of food proteins into breast milk. After maternal ingestion of a food protein such as dairy, the maternal gut's digestion of the food protein will determine the protein variation that ends up in breast milk. In other words, the food protein might be digested in such a way that the protein is less likely to cause the infant to have an allergic response. After protein digestion, the protein particles cross the maternal gut lining to a variable extent such that it's possible that not all of the food proteins end up in the maternal circulation. The food proteins that do end up in the maternal circulation are challenged with crossing the mammary gland epithelium into breast milk. Again, we have this variability among lactating individuals such that the permeability of the mammary gland epithelium is going to vary at different times of day, different stages of lactation, and whether there are other factors that influence permeability such as mastitis or overproduction. The studies that have been done on the timing of food proteins in breast milk after maternal ingestion have included cow's milk, wheat, egg, and peanut. When we look at studies on transfer of proteins into breast milk, it's clear that there's a wide variation between people and even within individuals, making it impossible to know precisely how much food protein and in what form will be present in breast milk. Because the food proteins differ in terms of what form they end up in breast milk, it's hard to predict what the infant's immune response will be. Several studies show that many women don't transfer food proteins into breast milk. For example, a few studies among women who were given food challenges demonstrated that 15% of women did not secrete the cow's milk protein beta-lactoglobulin into the breast milk, and 25% of women did not have any detectable ovalbumin from egg consumption in their breast milk. The majority of studies that have looked at how long it takes ingested food proteins to get into breast milk found that the average peak concentration of proteins occurs at around 1 to 4 hours after ingestion. The excretion of food proteins, or basically the duration of time the food protein stays in breast milk, will vary, but in general, studies done with peanut and cow's milk protein show that the proteins are excreted within hours, often 6 to 12 hours, and certainly within 24 hours. Unfortunately, because of lack of education in the field of breastfeeding medicine, physicians often don't understand the ramifications of asking the mother to stop breastfeeding for 2 weeks. There are risks of bottle preference, changes to the infant gut microbiome from formula, in addition to the risk of infant illness by taking away breast milk. The mother has the risk of complications from pumping, such as pump trauma, mastitis, and changes in milk production, which no longer matches the rate of infant milk intake. These breastfeeding complications increase the risk of premature weaning, which increases long-term health risks for both the infant and the parent. Another consideration here is that these infant reactions to food proteins are very rarely dangerous. Therefore, if the mother stops eating the suspected food, the baby is likely to be fine to be exposed to the food protein for another 6 to 12 hours, at which point the food proteins will be out of the breast milk anyway. So let's get the message out there that there's no reason to interrupt breastfeeding when there's suspicion of infant sensitivity to food proteins, unless the infant has had a life-threatening reaction. The main intervention should be providing education for the mother or lactating parent on how to avoid the food protein and options for dietary substitutions. Hey everyone, thanks for listening. I encourage you to check out iAble at lacted.org, which is LACTED.org, to learn more about our educational projects, courses, educational handouts, videos, live conferences, and webinars. By becoming a member, you are not only supporting our free projects, but you will also receive a series of benefits, which you can learn about at our website. I'll be back with another LACT fact in a few weeks.